in a German kind of mood. I hope you enjoyed that German Oompa band music to get us started. We are making sauerkraut today. Sauerkraut, of course, is a German word for sour cabbage, and it's a very simple process, as you're soon going to see. And it all starts out here in the cabbage patch. We're going to be cutting a couple of heads of green cabbage, and we're going to be adding a couple of heads of red cabbage to that, and we're going to transform it magically through the fermentation process into sauerkraut. So let's get on with it.
The ingredient list for making homemade sauerkraut is a very short one. It consists of cabbage, either red or green, preferably organic if you can get some or grow some, and salt. Now the salt can either be a fine type of sea salt or a rock salt. The equipment list for making homemade sauerkraut is also quite short. First, you'll need something for cutting the cabbage. For that, I recommend using a sharp chef's knife, although you can use a food processor or even a hand grater for a smaller quantity of cabbage. Secondly, you'll need something in which to place your cabbage for fermentation. For that, I use a large food-grade plastic bucket. But if you have access to a ceramic crock, that would also work very well. Finally, you need something to keep the cabbage down at the bottom of your recipient. And for that, I use a plate that fits perfectly in my food-grade plastic bucket, and you'll need to weight that down with something, and in my case, I'm using a wine jug for that.
Okay, we're going to start preparing our cabbage. The first step of the process is just to remove any leaves that don't look perfectly healthy to you. So in most cases with cabbage, that's just removing the outer layer. Okay, next we're going to cut our cabbage. We're going to start by just removing the ends. Those two can go onto our compost piles. Then we're going to cut, first of all, into the middle of the cabbage. Be very careful with this step. Next, we are going to remove the core. The core could go into your sauerkraut, but it is rather tough and it will take longer to ferment. So we're just going to get that guy out of there. Okay, we're now preparing our cabbage. As I mentioned before, we can use a grater, but I actually prefer to use a chef's knife. The trick here is just to try to get it as fine as you possibly can. That will allow it to ferment better. For the next step, we have all of our cut cabbage in here. You can see that it represents quite a bit. It's pretty much filling up, I'd say, 2/3 of our 5-gallon bucket. And we've applied some salt. We're going to put some more because we need to, as I said before, get that process going of drawing the water out of the cabbage. So we're going to go with that, see where that gets us. And you won't have this, but I just happen to have a very long wooden spoon. It's actually a polenta spoon from Italy, which I'm going to use just to mix things around a little bit more, get kind of down and dirty there. And once we're finished with this, we're going to start to tamp it down with our weight to try to reduce the volume a little bit. Okay, we're getting to the last stages of our sauerkraut making. We have cut up our sauerkraut, we've salted it, we have it inside there, we've kind of tamped it down to try to get some of the water to come out already. I've actually added some additional water in there. I've always found that you need to do that. I've read recipes where they say that's not necessary, but it does work for me to add some additional water to create your brine. So now we're going to be putting our plate in. The plate's function is to keep the sauerkraut at the bottom of our bucket, and we're going to press down on that, and we're going to then on top of that put our weight, which is, in this case is a large wine bottle. And as the sauerkraut ferments and develops, the volume will decrease and the plate will descend further and further into the bucket, and the water will rise. What's very important with making sauerkraut is to make sure that the kraut itself is not exposed directly to air. There needs to be a buffer of brine above the sauerkraut and the air, and by having this type of arrangement with a plate and a weight over that, that's how you can achieve that.
The next step in the process is very easy. You simply let Mother Nature and the lactofermentation process do their thing. You will want to cover up your container. This will keep out things like dust, and in the case of my household, other things like paper airplanes and juggling balls and other things that don't ferment particularly well. Finally, you'll want to find a place for storing your container. The idea here is to find a place that is convenient and not completely out of sight and out of mind, because you will want to check on the fermentation process from time to time. This could be an out-of-the-way corner of your kitchen, or it could be down in your basement, someplace out of the direct sun and where the temperature ranges between 50 and 65 degrees Fahrenheit. The next and final step in the process is both the easiest and the most pleasurable, and that's eating your sauerkraut. There are many different recipes that you can be using for preparing sauerkraut, but I'd recommend starting out by simply enjoying it raw. Within a week's time, you can already start serving up some sauerkraut from your vat. You'll notice that even after a couple of days, your kraut should start to bubble up and ferment. Within a week's time, you can serve up a deliciously tangy and crunchy sauerkraut salad. Eating sauerkraut raw is the best way to get all of the different health benefits that come from eating lacto-fermented foods. That said, it would be a shame not to try out some of the other delicious preparations for sauerkraut, and you can find a lot of them on the Kitchen Gardeners International website.